Intermission. Demiurge walked through the 9th level of the great tomb of Nazarick. The clacks of his hard leather shoes were swallowed almost instantly by the silence. He had stationed several minions here for security purposes, but was still unaccustomed to its mythical atmosphere. He looked around and smiled. Wonderful. His admiration was addressed to the 9th level in its entirety. These were the appropriate surroundings for the 41 supreme beings, to whom he would be loyal even if it meant abandoning everything, so he loved this view. Every time he walked the 9th level, his heart filled with joy, and his devotion to the creators was renewed. No, it wasn't just Demiurge. Even rowdy types like clowns and musicians would find themselves pausing out of respect, trying to melt into the silence. If there was someone whose heart did not fill with joy at this sight, it meant they were either not loyal enough to the 41 supreme beings, or they were created that way. Demiurge thought on this as he turned the corner. He had almost reached his destination, the private quarters of the last remaining supreme being and ruler of the great tomb of Nazarick, Ainzul Gon. When the door came into view, it opened and some figures exited. They seemed to see Demiurge as well and waited while he walked over. One was dressed like a butler, but all of his clothes, except his white gloves, were black and more suited to combat than to service. He was one of Nazarick's 10 male servants, but Demiurge didn't know which one. He couldn't tell them apart because they all wore ski masks like generic baddies in a superhero show and only communicated in strange squawks. Then there was the guy standing in front. Inane thoughts like, naked with a necktie, flickered through Demiurge's head. He was a penguin. There was no mistaking him. He was most definitely a penguin, and wore nothing but a black tie. Long time no see. In reply to Demiurge's warm greeting, the penguin grinned, or something like that, and said, "Indeed, Master Demiurge." Then he bobbed his head. Of course, he was no mere penguin. He was a type of grotesque called a birdman, as well as the assistant butler. Eclair, eclair, eclair. Normally, birdmen would, like the supreme being Pereroncino, have the head and wings of a bird of prey, as well as bird parts from the elbows and knees down, but for some reason this man was a penguin. Demiurge didn't question it. "Is Albedo in there?" "Yes, she is." Albedo was in charge of the great tomb of Nazarick while Ainz was gone, but it was widely known that she couldn't be found in her own quarters and was instead holed up in Ainz's. Since she had Ainz's permission to be there, no one objected except for Shaltir Bloodfallen, who was about to leave the tomb. When Demiurge had suggested that a good wife's role was to guard the house and wait for her husband's return, she had retorted, "What's wrong with a wife guarding her husband's room?" So there wasn't much he could say after that. Demiurge nodded an "I see" and chatted with Eclair. "It's rare for you to be out, Eclair. Don't you generally work around the guest rooms?" "Since Master Sebas is out, I need to perform his duties as well, so I was just meeting with Mistress Albedo to discuss some details." "Oh yeah. If Sebas is gone, the 9th level depends on you." "Exactly. I need to do a good job in preparation for the day when I will rule the great tomb of Nazarick." There was no change to Demiurge's smile, no matter how strange a thing was just said. It was widely known that Eclair was plotting to rule the great tomb, but that was because he was created that way by the 41 supreme beings, so there was no problem. Of course, if the order came down, they would liquidate him, but until then, there was no problem at all. "Indeed, do your best. By the way, what are you going to do first?" "Clean. What else is there? No one can clean so thoroughly as me. When I scrub the toilets, you can lick the bowl." Demiurge nodded in satisfaction with Eclair's overflowing confidence. "Wonderful. Your work is critical. If this floor were to become dirty, it could be taken as an insult to the Supreme Ones." He nodded emphatically and then asked a question. I am well aware of how important your work is now, but who is it that is in charge of administrative operations on this level while Sebas is away?
That would be the head maid, Pestonia. She's received orders from Master Sebas. Administrative operations isn't such a big job compared to cleaning.
I see. Two NPCs built by the same Supreme One with a clear division of roles. By the way, isn't it hard to clean with penguin hands?
It's precisely because I can do it that I am me.
Eclair puffed out his chest to demonstrate his overflowing confidence and then continued, sounding slightly offended.
But Master Demiurge, that doesn't sound like something you, second in cleverness here only to me, would ask.
He smoothed the golden decorative feathers growing on either side of his head with a comb he took from the male servant behind him.
The Supreme Lady Ankoro Mochimochi created me as not just any penguin, but a proud rockhopper penguin. Make no mistake, and these are not hands, they are wings.
Do excuse me. Demiurge bowed in apology, but Eclair told him not to worry about it, and then turned around to give an order to the servant.
Carry me!
The servant tucked Eclair under an arm. Eclair's way of walking was to hop forward, and from a certain perspective it was extremely slow, so whenever he had to go somewhere on foot, he had a servant carry him.
Well, Master Demiurge, I take my leave.
All right. See you again, Eclair. Demiurge glanced over once more as the assistant butler was carried away like a stuffed animal, and then he knocked on the door. It's Demiurge. I'm coming in. Of course, the master was not in, but what did that matter? To Demiurge, the rooms themselves were worthy of his respect. There was no reply, and he entered. Looking around, he noted that, as expected, Albedo was not there either. He sighed lightly and opened a door to go farther in. The 41 Supreme Beings' private quarters were designed as royal suites. There were innumerable rooms, including a large bathroom in the back, a living room with a bar and a piano, a master bedroom, guest rooms, a kitchen for their private chef to cook in, a dressing room, and so on. Out of all of these, the room Demiurge proceeded toward with no hesitation was the master bedroom. He knocked and entered without waiting for a reply. There was only one bed inside, but it was a magnificent king-sized one with a canopy. Inside it was a bulge slightly bigger than one person, squirming. Albedo. In response to Demiurge's disapproving tone of voice, the peerless beauty poked out her face. In fact, she was out to her shoulders and didn't appear to be wearing any clothes. Perhaps because she had been under the covers, her cheeks were flushed a delicate pink. What are you doing in there? When Lord Ines returns, I would like for him to be enveloped in my scent. Apparently all that squirming was a form of marking. Demiurge had no words. He just looked at this most elite NPC created by the 41 Supreme Beings, the captain of the floor guardians of the Great Tomb of Nazarick, and shook his head weakly. He didn't say, Lord Ines is undead, so he probably doesn't sleep in that bed, or, even if he could sleep, I'm sure the sheets would be changed. If she was satisfied, that was fine with him. Well, don't overdo it. I don't know what you mean by overdo it, but okay. Right, Lord Ines? Suddenly there was a face cheek to cheek with Albedo's. For a split second, Demiurge was shocked into silence, because he thought it was actually Ainsul Gone, but it wasn't thick enough and didn't even have a fraction of the presence of their supreme lord. Is that a body pillow? And who made such a thing? I did. At her immediate response, Demiurge cracked open his closed eyes. He didn't think she had that kind of skill. I may not look it, but I'm a pro at cleaning, washing, and sewing. Delighted in Demiurge's surprise, she boastfully continued, And I'm making clothes, including socks, for our child who will surely be born. I'm done with everything for the first 5 years. She giggled, grinning, and Demiurge wondered, a bit drained, if he should really leave her alone in this room. Boy boy or girl, either way. Oh, but what if it's intersex or sexless? Demiurge was once again at a loss for words and just watched as she moaned and groaned. To be sure, she was brilliant as the head of the Great Tomb of Nazarik's administrative operations, far better at that sort of thing than he was. But there was some doubts about her ability when it came to military affairs, such as handling defensive battles. That was where Demiurge came in. There was no issue at present, when they hadn't detected any immediate enemies. Demiurge forced himself to swallow his anxieties and believe that. His departure was an order from their master. There was no way he could voice any objections. Very well. I'm going to leave soon, as Lord Ain's commanded. That means the only floor guardians left in Nazarik at liberty to move freely are you and Cocytus. I don't think I need to remind you, but please take care. First Aura, Mare, Sebas, and Shaltir. And now you, huh? Yes, things will be fine. If it becomes necessary, I'll go to my sisters for support. And I'll have the Pleiades go all out. If I do all that, we'll be plenty able to buy time for everyone else to return. Surely you would need Lord Ain's permission to deploy your little sister, even in an emergency. And for the Pleiades as well. In the first place, 2 of them are out, so you can't even get the whole team together. If the situation is as dicey as that, why not just station Victim on a higher level? Things aren't that bad. Anyhow, we've made preparations to take countermeasures. But if the time comes, please hurry back. More importantly, what are you going to do with the supervising members of the Sunlit Scripture? You got permission from Lord Ain's to be in charge of them, right? It's fine if you take them, but I just have no idea what you're planning. Oh, them? Lord Ain's gave me permission to experiment. Demiurge smiled happily, and Albedo's shapely eyebrows crinkled. First, a healing magic experiment. A severed limb will disappear if you cast a healing spell on a stub. So if you heal the stub after force-feeding a human an arm, what happens to the nutritional value? If repeated, would the subject starve to death? Ah, I see. And that's not all. I had them vote on who will be eaten and who will be hacking off limbs with a dull saw, using their names. And why would you do that? It's obvious. It creates a hierarchy among the prisoners, food, cutters, and eaters. This, of course, causes hate to blossom between one-time comrades. Then, right when the critical level of hate is reached, I'll call out ever so sweetly to the food to expose them. They're very hard workers, these creatures full of hate. See, that's just disturbing. Nazarik was created by the Supreme Beings. There's no way we could betray Lord Ain's. Yet humans would betray their master. They have zero loyalty. That's why they're so interesting. I think it might be good for you to have some fun with that side of them. Just think of them as toys. I don't understand that way of thinking one bit. That's a terrible shame. Anyhow, if I stand here gabbing, I won't be able to carry out Lord Ain's orders on time, and we can't have that. If anything happens, get in touch, and I'll come right back. Sure. I don't think there will be anything I can't handle, but if there is, I'll call you. She slipped a willowy arm out from under the sheets and waved goodbye. Then if you'll excuse me. Oh, but if you're making clothes for a male child, I should warn you. It seems as though the Supreme Beings dress boys as girls. Huh?